One elderly farmer's chance encounter with a mysterious visitor would not only transform his struggling ranch, but unearth decades-old family secrets, reunite a broken lineage, and ultimately reshape the technological landscape of an entire industry. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn wind whistled through the gaps in Walter Jenkins' weathered barn as he studied the mounting bills spread across his kitchen table. At 74, the third-generation rancher had watched his once thriving, 300-acre property slowly dwindle to just 65 acres of workable land. With barely $275 left in his savings account and a property tax payment looming, Walter faced losing the land his grandfather had purchased in 1932. "Grandpa, I've fixed that tractor again, but honestly, it's on its last legs," called 25-year-old Emma, wiping grease from her hands as she entered the kitchen. His granddaughter had moved back to the ranch after finishing her veterinary studies, postponing her career when Walter's health began declining. Her hard-earned degree gathered dust while she helped keep the struggling family ranch afloat. The prolonged drought had devastated their cattle operation, forcing them to sell off most of their herd. The small roadside produce stand they'd opened, as a supplementary income source, barely covered the cost of seeds. Each month, the financial noose tightened a little more around the legacy Walter had promised his late wife he would preserve for future generations. "There's a fellow pulled up outside," Emma said, peering through the window. "Fancy car, city clothes. Probably another developer wanting to buy us out." Walter sighed, straightening his worn denim shirt as he rose from the table. Over the past year, various real estate speculators had approached with offers that seemed generous on the surface but were far below the land's true value. Each time, Walter had politely but firmly shown them the door. "Let me handle this," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had guided the ranch through countless hardships. The visitor waiting on the porch wasn't what Walter expected. A man in his early 40s, dressed not in a flashy suit but in simple, expensive-looking casual clothes. His car, parked by the gate, was indeed luxurious, a sleek electric vehicle that seemed almost alien against the backdrop of the rural landscape. "Mr. Jenkins?" the stranger asked, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Carson. I'm sorry to intrude, but I was hoping I might trouble you for some directions. My GPS seems to have given up the ghost out here." There was something in the man's demeanor, a hesitancy, a searching quality in his eyes that made Walter doubt this was truly about lost directions. Nevertheless, hospitality came naturally to the old rancher. "City technology doesn't always take kindly to country roads," Walter replied with a warm smile. "Where are you headed?" "I'm trying to find the old Meridian Crossroads," Daniel explained. "I was told there used to be a general store there, back in the day." Walter's eyebrows rose slightly. The Meridian Crossroads had been renamed and redeveloped nearly 30 years ago. Only locals who'd been around for decades would even remember the original name. "That's about 15 miles north," Walter said, gesturing vaguely. "Though there's nothing left of the old store now. Just a gas station and a mini-mart. You'd have better luck heading into Riverbrook proper if you're looking for supplies." Daniel nodded, though he seemed more interested in Walter than the directions. "Actually," he admitted after a moment, "I was hoping to find someone who might remember the area from back then. I'm researching some family history." The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and Walter found himself reluctant to send the man away so quickly. There was something familiar about him, though Walter couldn't quite place it. "Well, I've been around these parts my whole life," Walter offered. "Emma and I were just about to have some lunch. Simple fare, but you're welcome to join us and ask your questions. No sense in you driving around in this heat without a proper meal." Something flickered across Daniel's face, relief perhaps, or surprise at the casual invitation. I'd appreciate that more than you know, Mr. Jenkins. Inside, Emma had already set the table with their modest lunch: homemade bread, fresh, tomatoes from their garden, and a simple beef stew made with what remained of last week's roast. She raised an eyebrow at the unexpected guest but quickly set another place. "Daniel's doing some family research about the old Meridian area," Walter explained as they settled at the table. "Thought we might be able to help him out." As they ate, Daniel asked carefully phrased questions about the region's history, the families who had lived there, and the changes that had come with time. Walter answered generously, sharing stories that stretched back to his grandfather's day. There was something gratifying about passing along this oral history, these memories that might otherwise be lost to time. "The Carsons," Walter mused when Daniel mentioned his surname again. There was a Carson family that owned the lumber mill. Back in the 60s. Any relation? Daniel's fork paused midway to his mouth. "Actually, yes. My father, James Carson, grew up here. He left sometime in the late 70s, I believe." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Walter's weathered face showed a flicker of recognition. Jamie Carson? Tall fellow. Good with machines? Had a way with numbers too, if I remember correctly. The change in Daniel's demeanor was immediate and electric. He set down his fork carefully, as though afraid any sudden movement might scatter this unexpected connection. "You knew my father?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Sure did," Walter confirmed. "He was a few years younger than me, but everybody knew Jamie. Brilliant mind, always tinkering with something or other. Had big dreams about computers when most folks around here barely knew what they were." Emma watched the exchange with growing interest, sensing the conversation had shifted into something more significant than casual reminiscence. "Mr. Jenkins," Daniel said after a moment of charged silence, "I should be honest with you. Finding my father is exactly why I'm here. He left when I was just a baby. My mother raised me alone in Seattle. All I have are fragments, his name, that he came from this area, and a few old photographs." Walter's expression softened with understanding. "Family's the most important thing we have in this world, son. I'd be happy to tell you what I remember." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ranch, Walter shared stories of the James Carson he had known, a restless, brilliant young man with ambitions too big for this small rural community. They had worked together briefly at the lumber mill before James had left town suddenly, with little explanation to anyone. He talked about California, Walter recalled. Silicon Valley was just starting to become what it is now. He was determined to be part of it. Daniel listened with an intensity that spoke of decades of questions. As the conversation continued, Emma cleared the table and brought coffee, content to listen as the two men bridged years of history. "I should show you something," Walter said finally, rising with the slight stiffness of age. "Might interest you." From an old roll-top desk in the corner, Walter retrieved a battered photo album. Carefully turning the plastic-covered pages, he found what he was looking for: a faded photograph of a group of young men standing proudly beside a newly constructed building. "Town Library, 1977, Walter explained, pointing to a tall, lean young man at the edge of the group. "That's your father there. He designed the electrical system as a community project. Way ahead of its time, that system was. Still working perfectly last I heard." Daniel stared at the image with undisguised emotion. "I have so few pictures of him," he said quietly. "This is—" "Thank you." As the afternoon wore on, Daniel's questions became more specific, and gradually, a picture emerged of James Carson's life before he had disappeared from his son's world. Walter remembered more than he had initially realized: the inventions James had tinkered with, the ideas he had shared, the dreams he had nursed of a future built on technology that had seemed almost magical at the time. "Your grandfather, your father's father, Died when Jamie was just 15, Walter recalled. Hit him hard. His mother struggled after that. Maybe that's why he was so driven to make something of himself. As evening approached, Daniel finally checked his watch and seemed surprised by the time. "I've taken up your entire afternoon," he said apologetically. "I can't thank you enough for your kindness." "No trouble at all," Walter assured him. "It's nice to dust off those old memories sometimes. They fade if you don't take them out now and then." Daniel hesitated, then reached for his wallet. "Please, let me compensate you for your time and the meal." Walter waved away the gesture with firm dignity. "We don't take payment for hospitality around here, Mr. Carson. That's not our way." "Then at least let me." "The best thanks you can give is to find what you're looking for," Walter interrupted gently. "Family matters more than anything else in this world." Daniel nodded, visibly moved by the simple wisdom. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door, turning back to face the elderly rancher. "Mr. Jenkins, I should tell you something. I'm not just researching my family history out of curiosity." He took a deep breath. "My name is Daniel Carson. I founded Quantum Nexus Technologies." The name hung in the air between them. Even in their rural isolation, Walter and Emma had heard of QNT, one of the world's leading technology companies, responsible for breakthroughs in renewable energy storage and quantum computing. "I'm not here by accident," Daniel continued. "I've been searching for my father for years. Professional investigators, databases, DNA registries, I've tried everything. When I finally got a lead pointing to this area, I wanted to come myself. To see where he came from. To understand." Emma gasped softly. "You're the Daniel Carson? The one who developed the sustainable energy grid systems?" Daniel nodded, a hint of discomfort crossing his face. "Yes, and everything I've built, all of it, started with the stories my mother told me about my father's brilliance with electronics and his vision for technology that could change the world." Walter studied the man before him with new eyes, seeing now the resemblance to the young innovator he had known decades ago. "Your father would be proud," he said simply. He had that same look when he talked about his ideas, like he could see the future before anyone else. "I'd like to come back tomorrow, if that's all right," Daniel said. "There's so much more I want to ask, and—" he hesitated. "I'd like to hear more about this area, about the community my father was part of." "Our door's always open," Walter assured him, shaking his hand firmly. After Daniel had gone, Emma turned to her grandfather, her eyes wide. "Do you realize who that was? Daniel Carson is worth billions. His company revolutionized energy storage technology. They say he's going to Mars with that space exploration group next year." Walter nodded thoughtfully, watching the luxury car disappear down the dusty road. "Seems to me he's looking for something money can't buy," he observed quietly. "And that might be the most valuable thing of all." That night, as Walter lay in bed, his mind returned to the young James Carson he had known, brilliant, ambitious, but also troubled in ways he hadn't fully understood at the time. There had been rumors when James left town so suddenly, whispers, about an invention, about money that had changed hands, about promises broken. Walter had dismissed them as small-town gossip, but now, with the sun returned like a ghost from the past, those old stories stirred in his memory. Emma, too, found sleep elusive. The encounter had illuminated their financial troubles in harsh relief. The tech billionaire had sat at their worn table, eaten from their mismatched plates, while they faced losing everything. Yet her grandfather had refused even the suggestion of payment with the dignity that had guided his entire life. Dawn broke with the promise of another scorching day. Walter rose early as always, moving through his morning chores with the methodical precision of decades of practice. The cattle needed tending, irrigation needed checking, and the small vegetable plot required attention regardless of unexpected visitors or financial worries. Emma joined him as she always did, her veterinary training proving invaluable even in their reduced circumstances. They worked in comfortable tandem, the rhythm of ranch life continuing despite the extraordinary encounter of the previous day. "Do you think he'll really come back?" Emma asked as they paused for water in the shade of the old oak tree. "A man searching for his father will follow any lead," Walter replied, and we gave him plenty to think about. By mid-morning, their question was answered. The sleek electric car reappeared, kicking up dust on the approach to the ranch house. This time, Daniel wasn't alone. A woman accompanied him, elegant, professional, carrying a tablet and what appeared to be an old-fashioned paper notebook. "Mr. Jenkins," Daniel called, his face alight with barely contained excitement. "This is Sophia Reeves, my chief researcher. After our conversation yesterday, I asked her to do some intensive investigation overnight." Walter welcomed them onto the porch where he'd set a pitcher of homemade lemonade in anticipation of visitors. The air conditioning in the house had stopped working months ago, and the porch with its ceiling fan offered the only real respite from the heat. "We've found something remarkable," Daniel continued once they were settled. "Sophia, show him what you discovered." The researcher opened her tablet, pulling up images of old newspaper clippings and documents. "Mr. Jenkins, are you familiar with a patent filed in 1977 for an advanced circuit integration method?" Walter frowned, searching his memory. "Can't say that I am, specifically. Though Jamie was always talking about circuits and integration. Methods, technical stuff beyond my understanding." "This patent," Sophia continued, "was filed by a company called Meridian Technologies in March 1977. The inventor listed is James Carson, but the rights were assigned to the company at filing." She swiped to another document. Meridian Technologies was owned by a man named Victor Harrington. The name sent a jolt through Walter. "Vic Harrington," he said slowly. "Now there's a name I haven't thought about in years. Owned the biggest farm in the county back then. Had his fingers in everything, real estate, the bank board, even tried to get into politics for a while." Daniel leaned forward, his expression intense. "My father worked for Harrington?" "Not exactly," Walter said, the memories crystallizing as he spoke. "Jamie did some consulting for Vic's businesses. Electrical systems, early computer stuff. But they had a falling out. Big one, if I recall correctly. Around the time your father left town." Emma, who had joined them on the porch, watched the exchange with growing fascination. "What happened between them?" she asked. Walter shook his head. Nobody knew the details. Small towns run on gossip, but this was kept remarkably quiet. "All I remember is that suddenly Jamie was gone, and Vic was telling everyone he was starting some new technology venture. It didn't amount to much, though. At least not that we ever heard about." Sophia and Daniel exchanged a significant look. "Mr. Jenkins," Sophia said carefully, "the patent I mentioned? It became the foundation for modern circuit miniaturization. The rights were sold to a major tech company in 1985 for what would now be over $50 million. Victor Harrington is listed as receiving all proceeds from the sale." The implications hung in the air between them. Walter's weathered face showed dawning comprehension. "You think Vic stole Jamie's invention?" "The timing aligns perfectly with my father's disappearance," Daniel said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "My mother always said he left because of a betrayal, but she didn't know the details. She was already pregnant with me when he vanished." Walter rose from his chair, pacing the worn boards of the porch as he struggled to reconcile this new information with his memories. Jamie was always protective of his ideas, kept notebooks, locked them away. "But he trusted Vic, I remember that. Said Vic had the connections to make his inventions reality." "Is Victor Harrington still alive?" Emma asked. Sophia shook her head. "He died in 2010. His estate was divided among several children and grandchildren. But his records might still exist," Daniel added. "Business documents, correspondence, anything that might prove what really happened. And we believe those records might be here, in this area. Walter stopped his pacing, turning to face them with sudden understanding. The old Harrington estate. That's what you're really looking for. Daniel nodded. According to our research, the main house was sold off years ago, but a storage facility on the original property remained in the family trust. We've been trying to locate it, but the land has been subdivided so many times that the current maps don't match the historical records. For several moments, Walter was silent, weighing decades-old loyalties against the earnest quest of a son searching for truth about his father. Finally, he spoke. "I know where it is," he said simply. "The old Harrington storage building. It's not where you'd think to look." Daniel's composure briefly cracked, raw hope showing through. "You do? Where?" "It's on Cutler's Ridge, disguised as an agricultural storage facility." Vic was paranoid about industrial espionage, kept all his important papers and prototypes there. Had a state-of-the-art security system for its time. "Can you take us there?" Daniel asked, the controlled businessman now fully replaced by the searching son. Walter hesitated, thinking of the day's work waiting for attention, of the bills still spread across his kitchen table. Yet before him sat a man who had everything money could buy but lacked the one thing Walter had treasured his whole life, a connection to his roots, his history, his father. "Yes," he said finally, "I can take you. Though I doubt we'll be welcome visitors." As Walter went inside to prepare for the unexpected journey, Emma followed, concern evident in her expression. "Grandpa, are you sure about this? Getting involved in what sounds like a decades-old corporate theft?" Walter looked at his granddaughter, seeing the worry in her eyes. "That young man out there has spent his life building something remarkable, all while missing half of who he is. If I can help him find those missing pieces, then that's what I'm going to do." Emma nodded slowly. "I'm coming with you." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Walter replied with a smile. An hour later, they were traveling in Daniel's vehicle, following Walter's directions along increasingly remote country roads. The painful irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone present. A brilliant innovator had died in obscurity, while his stolen work had launched another family's fortune. Meanwhile, his son had independently risen to prominence in the same field, driven by an inherited brilliance he had never fully understood. "I propose a solution," Daniel said after a moment of heavy silence. "A joint historical record, acknowledging both families' contributions to technology innovation. Recognition of James Carson's original work, while preserving the legitimate accomplishments of Harrington Enterprises." "And financial compensation?" Marcus asked warily. Daniel shook his head. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What I want is justice for my father's memory, not financial gain." Eleanor approached Daniel, her eyes filled with decades of unspoken regret. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Your father left behind more than just these notebooks. There was a prototype, a working model of his integration system that Victor never found." Eleanor's revelation hung in the air like a physical presence, shifting the atmosphere in the dusty archive room. Victor was always fixated on the documentation, the patents, the legal framework, she continued, her voice gaining strength as decades of silence finally broke. But James was a builder at heart. He created a working prototype that demonstrated his circuit integration method in action, something Victor desperately wanted but never found. Daniel's composure, maintained so carefully throughout the confrontation, finally cracked. "A prototype? Where? After all these years, could it still exist?" "Your father knew Victor was going to betray him," Eleanor explained, moving to a filing cabinet that appeared untouched for years. "He came to me the night before he left town. Asked me to keep something safe, away from my brother-in-law's hands. I didn't fully understand its importance then, but I honored his request." Marcus watched in stunned silence as his aunt unlocked A drawer with a key she withdrew from around her neck. The revelation clearly shook his understanding of his family legacy to its core. "All these years," he murmured. "The family fortune, our standing in the community, our name, built on someone else's innovation." Walter placed a weathered hand on the younger man's shoulder, his touch conveying understanding rather than judgment. "A hard truth is still better than a comfortable lie, son. Your grandfather made a terrible choice, but you don't have to continue bearing its weight." From the drawer, Eleanor carefully withdrew a metal case, its surface dulled with age but the lock still intact. He said if his son ever came looking, this would help him understand. She held it out to Daniel with hands that trembled slightly. "I've kept my promise for nearly 40 years. The case was surprisingly heavy for its size. Daniel accepted it with reverence, setting it carefully on a nearby table. Everyone gathered around as he examined the simple combination lock securing it. "Did he tell you how to open it?" Daniel asked. Eleanor shook her head. "He said his son would know the combination when the time came. It was his way of ensuring only the right person would access it." Daniel stared at the lock, emotion warring. With analytical thought, "My father's legacy, protected all these years, waiting for me to find it." He turned the dials thoughtfully. "What numbers would my father have chosen? What would he expect me to know?" Emma, watching Daniel struggle, offered gently, "What's the most important date in your family history? Something significant too." "Both of you?" A look of realization crossed Daniel's face. Carefully, he rotated the dials to form a 6-digit sequence. "My mother's birthday," he said quietly. "The day their lives intertwined." With a satisfying click, the lock released. Inside the case, nestled in custom-fitted foam, lay a device that seemed both primitive and revolutionary. About the size of a thick book, it contained meticulously arranged circuits and components, with a small display panel and what appeared to be input mechanisms. "This is it," Daniel whispered, his fingers hovering over but not quite touching the device. "My father's original prototype for circuit integration that would eventually revolutionize computing." Sophia leaned in, her researcher's eye recognizing the historical significance. "The design principles are recognizable, but this implementation is decades ahead of what was commercially available in the late 1970s. Your father truly was a visionary." Beneath the device lay a sealed envelope with a single word written across it in firm handwriting: "Son." The room fell silent as Daniel carefully opened the envelope to reveal a handwritten letter. The paper yellowed with age, but the ink still clear. "To my son," Daniel read aloud, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "If you're reading this, then you've discovered part of your heritage that was taken from me. I don't know what kind of man you'll grow to be, or what the world will look like when you find this, but I hope you'll understand that I didn't abandon you by choice." Walter and Emma exchanged glances, witnessing a moment so private yet so profound that it seemed to transcend the boundaries between strangers and family. "Victor Harrington will claim he owns the technology in the device you now hold." Daniel continued reading. "Legally, he may have succeeded in stealing the patents. But the knowledge, the vision, the understanding of where technology could lead, that remains mine to pass to you. This prototype demonstrates principles of circuit integration that will someday transform computing. The official story will credit others, but you should know the truth." Daniel paused, taking a steadying breath before continuing. "I'm leaving to protect your mother and you from Victor's threats and to try to build something new somewhere else. Know that every day away from you both is a sacrifice I make unwillingly. If circumstances have kept us apart, please understand that you were never absent from my thoughts or my heart. The same innovative spirit that created this device lives in you. It is your birthright, regardless of patents or legal documents." The letter concluded with a simple signature: "Your father, James Carson." In the silence that followed, even Marcus Harrington seemed moved by the personal tragedy that had unfolded alongside the corporate theft. The human cost of his grandfather's actions stood before him in the person of Daniel Carson, a son who had grown up without his father, who had built his own technology empire without knowing he was fulfilling his father's interrupted legacy. "I never knew," Marcus said finally. "Our family history celebrates my grandfather as a technology pioneer. His circuit integration patents are framed in our corporate headquarters. We never questioned where the innovations truly came from." Eleanor's gaze was compassionate but unflinching. Victor was determined to erase James from the story. He threatened anyone who questioned the official narrative. Even family. Walter nodded slowly, old memories resurfacing. The rumors died quickly. Anyone who knew Jamie well enough to suspect the truth was either paid off or intimidated into silence. Small towns have long memories, but even longer fears. Daniel carefully returned the letter to its envelope, his movements deliberate, as though handling a sacred artifact. "My mother told me my father was brilliant, but didn't live to see his ideas realized. She never mentioned theft or betrayal. Perhaps to protect me from bitterness, or perhaps because she didn't know the full story either." "What will you do with this knowledge?" Eleanor asked quietly. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Daniel looked at the prototype, the letter, then at the people gathered around him, Walter and Emma, who had unwittingly helped him discover his heritage. Marcus bearing the weight of his grandfather's misdeeds. Eleanor who had kept faith, with a promise for decades. "The truth deserves to be known," he said finally. "Not to destroy the Harrington legacy or to seek vengeance, but to restore my father's place in the history of technology innovation." To complete the record, Marcus seemed to age before their eyes, the family mythology he had been raised with crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. "My grandfather built an empire on someone else's foundation," he said, the admission clearly painful. "What does that make everything that came after?" "Complicated," Daniel replied, his voice gentler than might have been expected. "Just like most family legacies. The wrong done to my father doesn't negate everything your family built afterward. The question is what we do with the truth now that we know it." Eleanor straightened, decision evident in her bearing. "I've kept James's secret for too long. I'm prepared to make a sworn statement about what I witnessed back then, Victor's threats, the legal maneuvering, all of it." As the implications of the discovery continued to unfold, Walter moved to the window, gazing out at the approaching evening. The day that had begun with sharing a simple lunch with a stranger had evolved into something none of them could have anticipated. The unraveling of a decades-old injustice, the reunion of a son with his father's legacy, the potential reshaping of technology history. Emma joined her grandfather, concern evident in her expression. "It's getting late, Grandpa. We should think about heading back to the ranch soon." Walter nodded, though his eyes remained on the dramatic tableau being played out before them. "Some journeys can't be rushed, Emma. This young man has waited a lifetime to find his father. A few more hours won't hurt us." As they watched, Daniel carefully repacked the prototype, handling it with reverence. "I'd like to take this with me," he said to Eleanor. "It belongs with my father's son." She nodded without hesitation. "That's why I preserved it all these years, for this moment." Marcus, who had been silent for several minutes, finally spoke. "What do you want from Harrington Enterprises? Financially, I mean. This evidence could form the basis for a substantial legal claim." Daniel shook his head. "I told you before, I don't need money. What I want is acknowledgement. Public recognition of James Carson as the original inventor of the circuit integration method that transformed computing. A correction of the historical record. And the patents?" Marcus pressed. "They're still valuable, still generating licensing revenue." "We can discuss that," Daniel replied. "Perhaps a foundation in my father's name, funding technology education for rural students. Something that would honor his legacy by creating opportunities for others. The answer seemed to ease some of Marcus's tension. Not absolution, perhaps, but a path forward that didn't involve the complete destruction of his family's name and business. As the discussion continued, Walter and Emma stepped outside for a moment, the cool evening air a welcome relief after the emotionally charged atmosphere inside. "What an extraordinary day," Emma remarked, gazing up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. A simple act of hospitality leading to all this. Walter nodded, his weathered face thoughtful in the twilight. Life has a way of connecting dots we didn't even know existed. That young man walked up to our porch searching for his father, and somehow the universe arranged for us to help him find what he was looking for. "Do you think it will make a difference for our situation?" Emma asked hesitantly. "The ranch, I mean. The bills haven't gone away just because we've been part of someone else's life-changing day." Walter put his arm around his granddaughter's shoulders. "I've lived long enough to know that doing the right thing rarely comes with guarantees. But I've also never regretted choosing decency over advantage." Inside, the conversation had shifted to practical matters: how to document the discovery, what legal steps might be necessary, the careful process of revising corporate and technological history. "I'll need to bring in my legal team," Daniel was saying as Walter and Emma re-entered. "Not for litigation, but to ensure everything is properly documented and authenticated." Eleanor nodded. "I have other materials as well. Correspondence, notes I made at the time. I've kept them hidden all these years, not quite brave enough to come forward on my own." As the discussion continued, Daniel suddenly seemed to become aware of the time. He turned to Walter and Emma with genuine contrition. "I've completely monopolized your day. You came up here as a favor to a stranger, and I've pulled you into something far more complicated than any of us anticipated." Walter waved away the apology. "Some days are meant to be extraordinary, Mr. Carson. I'm just glad we could help you find some answers." "Still," Daniel insisted, "you've gone above and beyond simple hospitality. Please allow me to compensate you for your time and assistance." Once again, Walter politely but firmly declined. "That's not why we helped you. Some things aren't about money." Daniel studied the elderly rancher with growing respect. "Your principles remind me of how my mother described my father, unwavering, even when it would have been easier to compromise." As they prepared to leave the storage facility, arrangements were made for future meetings. Eleanor would provide her sworn statement, Marcus would begin the delicate process of revising corporate history, and Daniel would secure and authenticate his father's prototype and papers. The drive back to the Jenkins ranch was quiet, each person absorbed in their thoughts after the emotional revelations of the day. The prototype, secured in its case, rested on Daniel's lap, his hands occasionally touching it as though reassuring himself of its reality. "Will you try to make it work?" Emma asked, breaking the contemplative silence. "The prototype, I mean. After all these years, is it even possible?" Daniel smiled, the first genuine, unguarded expression they had seen from him. "That's exactly what I intend to do. Not just to make it work, but to understand how my father's mind approached problems, how he envisioned solutions. It's the closest I'll ever come to working alongside him." When they arrived back at the ranch, the kitchen light glowed warmly. In the darkness, a beacon of simplicity after a day of complex emotions and revelations. Walter invited Daniel in for coffee before his drive back to town, an offer accepted with evident gratitude. As Emma prepared the coffee, Daniel moved around the modest kitchen, taking in details he had missed during his first visit: the faded photographs on the refrigerator, the well-worn family Bible on the side table, the handmade quilt draped over a chair. Evidence of a life rooted in continuity and connection. Precisely what he had been missing. "Your home feels lived in," he observed. "Like it holds memories in every corner." Walter nodded, understanding the observation for the wistful comparison it was. Been in the family for 3 generations. Not always easy keeping it going, especially lately, but some things are worth the struggle. Daniel's gaze sharpened, picking up on the implied financial difficulties. The drought has been hard on ranchers in this region, from what I understand. Drought, rising costs, changing markets, Walter acknowledged without self-pity. Same challenges facing most small agricultural operations these days. We adapt where we can, hold on where we must. Emma set mugs of coffee before them, joining the conversation. The irrigation system needs a complete overhaul, but that's well beyond our current budget. We're using stopgap measures where possible. Daniel seemed about to respond when his phone rang. Apologizing, he stepped outside to take the call, leaving Walter and Emma alone in the kitchen. He noticed, Emma said quietly, about our financial situation. Walter stirred his coffee thoughtfully, observant man. Like his father, from what I remember of Jamie. When Daniel returned, his expression had shifted to one of focused determination. That was my executive team, he explained. They've been working on our rural technology initiative while I've been otherwise occupied today. Walter raised an eyebrow inquiringly. It's a new program we're developing, Daniel continued. Bringing sustainable technology solutions to agricultural communities, particularly family operations struggling with climate change impacts. Solar-powered irrigation systems, soil monitoring technology, efficiency improvements, all designed to help small farms and ranches remain viable in changing conditions. Emma exchanged a glance with her grandfather, both recognizing the direction of the conversation. We've been looking for a pilot implementation site, Daniel added casually. Somewhere to refine the systems before broader deployment. Ideally, a multi-generational operation with diverse agricultural elements. A place like this ranch, in fact. Walter set down his coffee mug carefully. Mr. Carson. Daniel, please. Daniel, Walter amended. If you're suggesting what I think you are, I appreciate the thought. Truly. But we're not looking for charity. Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. This isn't charity, Mr. Jenkins. It's a legitimate business arrangement. We need a real-world testing environment for our systems. You need technological solutions to help your ranch remain viable. We'd compensate you for your participation in the program, naturally, and the installed systems would remain yours after the pilot period. Emma studied him intently. And this program was already in development. Before today? Absolutely, Daniel confirmed. It's been in planning for over a year. The timing is admittedly convenient, but the program itself is genuine. Your ranch would be doing my company a service by participating. Walter was silent for a long moment, weighing pride against practicality, independence against opportunity. I'd need to see the details, he said finally. Understand exactly what would be involved. Of course, Daniel agreed readily. I'll have my team prepare a complete presentation. You can take all the time you need to consider it. As they continued discussing the potential arrangement, the conversation gradually shifted back to the day's remarkable discoveries. The prototype rested on the kitchen table between them, a tangible link between past and present, between father and son. I still can't quite believe it, Daniel admitted, his fingers tracing the edge of the case. After all these years of searching, to find not just information about my father, but his actual work, his words to me across time. Faith has a way of being rewarded, Walter observed. Not always in the ways we expect, but often in the ways we need. Daniel nodded slowly. I've achieved more success than most people dream of, built technologies that have changed how the world works. But today, finding this connection to my father feels more significant than any corporate milestone. As the evening deepened, the conversation turned reflective, the extraordinary events of the day settling into perspective. Walter shared stories of the community as it had been when James Carson was part of it, filling in the human details around the technical brilliance Daniel had inherited. He had a laugh that made everyone around him smile, Walter recalled. Could explain complex ideas in ways that made sense even to those of us without technical backgrounds. That orchard at the north end of town? He designed an irrigation system for it that's still working perfectly 40 years later. Each small detail was a precious gift to Daniel, pieces of a puzzle he had been trying to complete his entire life. The father he had never known became more dimensional, more real with each remembered anecdote. He would have been proud of you, Walter said finally. Not just for your success, but for the man you've become. For never giving up the search. For him, when it came time for Daniel to leave, the farewell had none of the formality of their first meeting. The shared experiences of the day had forged a connection that transcended their different backgrounds and circumstances. I'll be in touch about the Rural Technology Initiative, Daniel promised as he prepared to depart. And about the developments with the Harrington situation. There will be legal processes, public statements eventually. Walter nodded. We'll be here, same as we've always been. Daniel looked back at the modest ranch house, illuminated by the porch light against the vast darkness of the rural night. Thank you, he said simply, for sharing your lunch with a stranger, for helping me find my father. As his car disappeared down the long driveway, Emma turned to her grandfather. Do you think his technology program could really save the ranch? Walter gazed thoughtfully after the departing headlights. Maybe, but I think something more important happened today than finding solutions to our financial problems. What's that? Emma asked. A reminder that the most valuable legacies aren't about money or property, Walter replied. They're about connections. About the stories we're part of and the ones we help others discover. They stood together in the quiet night, grandfather and granddaughter, heirs to their own legacy of perseverance and integrity that had, in its own unexpected way, helped heal a breach in another family story. Come on, Walter said finally, his arm around Emma's shoulders. We've got early chores tomorrow, regardless of billionaire visitors and historical revelations. As they turned back toward the house, neither could have anticipated how profoundly their lives would continue to intersect with Daniel Carson's, or how a simple act of hospitality would ultimately transform not just their struggling ranch, but an entire community's future. The morning after Daniel Carson's departure dawned with the familiar rhythm of ranch life, animals to be fed, equipment to be checked, endless small tasks that waited for no one, regardless of extraordinary circumstances. Walter moved through his chores with practiced efficiency, his mind turning over the previous day's revelations as his hands worked. Emma joined him at the cattle trough, her expression thoughtful. Do you think he'll really come back? With his technology program? I mean, or was that just his way of trying to repay us without offending your pride? Walter considered the question as he adjusted the water flow. I believe he meant it. A man searching for his father for that long develops a deep appreciation for sincerity. I don't think he'd offer something he didn't intend to follow through on. 3 days passed with no word from Daniel Carson, long enough for Emma to begin wondering if their extraordinary encounter had been nothing more than a fleeting intersection of lives, significant in the moment, but ultimately without lasting impact. Walter, however, maintained his quiet certainty that the connection formed over that shared lunch had been genuine. Some things need time to take root, he observed as they worked together to patch a leaking section of irrigation pipe. Another temporary fix for a system desperately in need of complete replacement. A man reunited with his father's legacy after 40 years has a lot to process. Emma wiped sweat from her brow, looking out across fields that had grown increasingly parched despite their best efforts. I hope you're right, Grandpa. But we can't count on a billionaire's promise to save this place. The bank won't wait much longer on those payments. Walter straightened slowly, his joints protesting the movement after hours of crouching over the irrigation system. "I've never counted on anything but hard work and faith, Emma. Not about to start gambling on miracles now." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of vehicles approaching, unusual for their remote location. Moving to higher ground, they watched as a small convoy made its way toward the ranch, a sleek SUV leading, followed by two large trucks bearing the Quantum Nexus Technologies logo. "Well now," Walter said with the hint of a smile. "Seems your billionaire might be a man of his word after all." By the time they reached the ranch house, Daniel Carson was already stepping from the SUV, accompanied by a team of people carrying tablets and equipment cases. His face brightened when he spotted Walter and Emma approaching. "Mr. Jenkins, Emma," he called, striding to meet them. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. We've been working around the clock on the rural technology initiative since my visit, and I wanted to present our proposal in person." Walter extended his hand, his weathered palm meeting Daniel's in a firm handshake. "No apology needed. Our door's always open, as I told you before." Daniel gestured to the people with him. "This is Dr. Leela Sato, our head of Sustainable Agricultural Technology and her implementation team. If you're agreeable, they'd like to conduct a preliminary assessment of your property today." Dr. Sato stepped forward, a woman in her 50s with an air of practical intelligence. "Mr. Jenkins, it's a pleasure to meet you. Daniel has explained your situation, and we believe your ranch would be an ideal candidate for our pilot program." Emma looked skeptically at the team unloading equipment from the trucks. "You seem to have brought quite a lot for just a preliminary assessment." Daniel had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I may have authorized the team to come prepared for immediate implementation if you approve the proposal. Time is a factor. With the continuing drought conditions." Walter's expression remained measured. "Still need to see exactly what you're proposing before I agree to anything happening on my land." "Absolutely," Daniel agreed immediately. "Dr. Sato has prepared a complete presentation. Perhaps we could discuss it over lunch?" I took the liberty of having meals brought for everyone. As the technical team began their preliminary survey of the property, Walter, Emma, Daniel, and Dr. Sato gathered around the kitchen table. The contrast between their previous simple lunch and the gourmet spread now being laid out was stark. Yet Daniel's manner remained refreshingly free of condescension. Dr. Sato opened her presentation, displaying diagrams of an integrated water management system that combines solar-powered pumps, precision irrigation, soil moisture monitoring, and water reclamation. "The core technology was originally developed for our Mars habitation project," she explained. "But we realized its potential applications for Earth's increasingly water-stressed agricultural regions." "Mars," Emma repeated incredulously. "You're proposing to install space technology on our ranch?" Daniel smiled. "Adapted for terrestrial use, but yes. The principles are the same, maximizing efficiency in water-limited environments. The system could reduce your water usage by up to 60% while potentially increasing crop yields." Walter studied the specifications carefully, asking pointed questions that revealed his deep understanding of his land's needs. Each inquiry was met with detailed, respectful responses from Dr. Sato, who clearly recognized the value of his experiential knowledge. "The installation would be phased," she continued, "with minimal disruption to your ongoing operations. We'd start with the main irrigation infrastructure, then integrate the monitoring systems, and finally implement the reclamation components." "And the cost?" Walter asked directly. "What exactly would this partnership entail financially?" Daniel leaned forward. "As I mentioned, this would be a pilot implementation. Quantum Nexus would cover all equipment and installation costs. In return, we ask for 2 years of performance data and your feedback on the system's functionality in real-world conditions. We'd compensate you monthly for your participation in the research program, Enough to cover your current mortgage, payments with additional funds for operational expenses. He slid a document across the table outlining the proposed financial arrangements. The figures were substantial, far more generous than a simple test site agreement would typically warrant. Walter's eyebrows rose as he reviewed the numbers. This is considerably more than standard research participation compensation. The accelerated timeline adds value, Daniel replied smoothly. And your multi-generational knowledge of this land provides insights our technical team couldn't acquire elsewhere. Emma, reviewing the document over her grandfather's shoulder, recognized the arrangement for what it was, a way to save their ranch without wounding Walter's pride with outright charity. The compensation was justified within the framework of a legitimate business relationship, yet generous enough to resolve their financial crisis completely. There's something else, Daniel added, his tone shifting slightly. A personal project I'd like to propose separate from the main initiative. He withdrew a folder containing architectural renderings of what appeared to be a small research facility. My team has been developing educational outreach programs to inspire rural students towards STEM careers. I'd like to establish a James Carson Innovation Center on a small parcel of your land, a place where local students could access technology education and resources otherwise unavailable in this region. Walter's expression softened at the mention of James Carson's name. A fitting tribute, he observed quietly. I'd lease the land from you at market rates, Daniel continued. The facility would create several permanent local jobs and offer scholarships for promising students. It would be relatively small, just 2 acres at the northern boundary of your property. Emma studied the renderings with growing interest. You're proposing to build a technology education center in one of the most underserved rural communities in the state? Daniel nodded. Access to technology education shouldn't be determined by geography. Every young person deserves the opportunity to discover and develop their potential, just as my father might have under different circumstances. The simple lunch that had begun their connection had expanded into something neither Walter nor Emma could have imagined, not just a solution to their immediate financial problems, but a transformation that could benefit the entire community while honoring a legacy of innovation that had nearly been erased from history. Walter was silent for several long moments, considering both proposals with the careful deliberation that had guided his decisions throughout his life. Finally he looked up, meeting Daniel's expectant gaze. The irrigation technology makes good sense for the land, he said, and the education center. Well, this community could certainly use those opportunities. He extended his hand across the table. You have yourself a partner, Mr. Carson. The handshake that sealed their agreement bridged more than just a business arrangement. It connected generations, healed historical injustices, and created possibilities where there had been only looming loss. As the technical team continued their survey of the property, Walter took Daniel on a walking tour of the ranch, pointing out the areas most affected by the drought and sharing the history of the land as they moved across it. My grandfather started with just 50 acres back in 1932, Walter explained as they crested a rise overlooking the eastern pastures. Bought more when he could, weathered the worst of the Dust Bowl years without losing the core property. Taught my father, who taught me, that land isn't just something you own. It's something you hold in trust for those who come after you. Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of that philosophy. My company owns properties worldwide, but I've never felt the kind of connection you have to this place. There's something profound about a family history rooted in one piece of earth. Different kinds of legacies, Walter observed. Your father's was ideas, concepts, and innovations that could travel beyond any single location. Mine is this land, fixed in place, but evolving through generations. They paused at the northern boundary, where the proposed education center would be built. The site offered a sweeping view of the surrounding countryside, distant mountains, forming a dramatic backdrop. Your father would be proud, Walter said, watching Daniel survey the landscape. Not just of your success, but of how you're choosing to honor his memory. Daniel's expression held a complexity of emotions: grief for the relationship he'd never had, gratitude for the connection he'd found, determination to create meaning from the loss. I've spent my entire adult life building technologies, companies, systems, always with this empty space inside me where my father should have been. Finding his work, his words to me. It's filled something I didn't fully realize was missing. That's the thing about fathers and sons, Walter replied thoughtfully. The connection doesn't end with absence. It just takes different forms. As evening approached, the technical team completed their initial assessment, confirming the feasibility of the proposed water management system. Implementation could begin as early as the following week, with the first phase operational within a month, just in time for the most critical irrigation period. Before departing, Daniel spent time with Emma, discussing the educational component of the project. Her background in veterinary science made her an ideal local liaison for the STEM programs they hoped to establish. We'd like to offer internships for high school students, Daniel explained as they reviewed the educational framework. Hands-on experience with agricultural technology, renewable energy systems, even some aspects of the quantum computing work we're doing. Would you consider overseeing that program once the center is established? Emma looked surprised. Me? I'm a veterinarian, not a technology expert. You're a scientist who understands this community, Daniel countered. Someone who chose to return to your roots despite having opportunities elsewhere. That perspective is exactly what we need to make this program meaningful to rural students. The opportunity represented everything Emma had hoped to bring back to her community: educational advancement, technological access, a bridge between traditional agricultural life and modern innovation. It would allow her to use her scientific training while remaining connected to the ranch that had shaped her. I'd be honored, she said finally. Though I have a lot to learn about your technologies, Daniel smiled. That's the beauty of knowledge, it grows when shared. Your grandfather's wisdom about this land, combined with cutting-edge technology, creates something neither could achieve alone. As the sun began to set, the Quantum Nexus team packed up their equipment, preparing to depart with comprehensive data and implementation plans. The day that had begun with uncertainty about the ranch's future was ending with transformative possibilities taking shape. Before leaving, Daniel lingered on the porch with Walter, watching the golden light of sunset transform the landscape they had spent the day discussing. Thank you, Daniel said simply. Not just for agreeing to the partnership, but for everything that led to this moment. Sharing your lunch with a stranger, helping me find my father's legacy, showing me a kind of connection to place and history I've never experienced before. Walter nodded, understanding the depth of gratitude behind the simple words. Seems to me we're both getting something valuable here. That's the best kind of arrangement between men. I've been thinking about what you said, Daniel continued, about different kinds of legacies. My father left me his innovative spirit, his technical vision. What I've lacked is the grounding you've described, the connection to something enduring beyond technological advancement. Walter studied the younger man with the insight born of decades of observing life's patterns. Perhaps that's the real gift in all this, not just you finding your father's legacy, but discovering what was missing in your own. As Daniel prepared to depart, he handed Walter an envelope. The formal contract for both projects. Take your time, have your lawyer review it. Nothing needs to be finalized until you're completely comfortable with the arrangements. Walter accepted the envelope with a nod of appreciation for the respect the gesture represented. No pressure, no rush, just a recognition of the significance of the decisions being made. One more thing, Daniel added, reaching into his vehicle. I thought you might want to see this. He handed Walter a tablet displaying the draft of a press release. The headline read, Quantum Nexus Technologies acknowledges James Carson as pioneer of circuit integration method, establishes foundation in his honor. It's scheduled for release next week, Daniel explained. Eleanor Harrington has provided her sworn statement, and Marcus has agreed to a joint announcement acknowledging the historical record. After 40 years, my father will finally receive the recognition he deserved. Walter handed the tablet back with a smile of approval. Justice has a way of finding its path, however long the journey takes. As Daniel's convoy disappeared down the long driveway, Emma joined her grandfather on the porch. It's really happening, isn't it? Everything's going to change. Walter put his arm around her shoulders, his gaze on the land that had supported 4 generations of his family. Some things will change, others will remain exactly as they should be. That's the balance we've always sought, honoring what came before while embracing what comes next. The weeks that followed brought a flurry of activity to the Jenkins ranch. Construction crews arrived to begin installation of the water management system, their work choreographed carefully to minimize disruption to the daily operations. Solar panels rose on previously underutilized sections of the property, capturing energy to power the new irrigation infrastructure. Monitoring stations were established throughout the fields, collecting data on soil conditions, moisture levels, and crop health. Walter, initially cautious about the unfamiliar technology, found himself increasingly engaged with the implementation process. His deep knowledge of the land's specific characteristics proved invaluable to the technical team, helping them adapt their systems to address decades-old challenges with water distribution and soil composition. See this section here? He would point out during the daily progress meetings. It's waterlogged every spring, but bone dry by August. Been that way since my grandfather's time. Dr. Sato and her team welcomed these insights, incorporating Walter's experiential wisdom into their technical solutions. The resulting system was becoming not just an imposed technology, but a collaborative creation that honored both innovation and tradition. Emma, meanwhile, immersed herself in learning about the technologies being implemented, preparing for her future role with the education center. Her scientific background allowed her to grasp the technical concepts quickly, while her deep roots in the community gave her insight into how best to translate these innovations for local students. We need to connect this to what they already know, she explained during a planning session for the educational programs. Show them how the technology enhances rather than replaces the agricultural knowledge that's been passed down through generations. Daniel visited regularly, monitoring the progress of both projects with evident personal investment beyond mere business interest. His relationship with Walter deepened with each visit, the unlikely friendship between the elderly rancher and the tech billionaire growing through shared values despite their different backgrounds. 1 month into the implementation, the first phase of the water management system became operational. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Fields that had been struggling under drought conditions began to revive as precisely calibrated irrigation delivered water exactly where and when it was needed, with minimal waste. It's like watching the land breathe again, Walter observed as he and Daniel surveyed a section of pasture already showing signs of renewal. Reminds me of how it looked when I was a boy, before the climate started changing so dramatically. Daniel nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. The efficiency metrics are exceeding even our projections. Your land is responding remarkably well to the system. Good land always responds to proper care, Walter replied. Just needs the right tools sometimes. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a vehicle neither recognized, an expensive sedan bearing official government plates. A distinguished-looking woman in her 60s emerged, her professional attire and bearing suggesting a position of significant authority. "Mr. Carson?" she called, approaching them with purposeful strides. "I'm Senator Catherine Lawson. I was hoping we might speak about your rural technology initiative." Daniel greeted her with professional courtesy, though his surprise at the unannounced visit was evident. "Senator Lawson, this is unexpected. How did you know where to find me?" "When a technology leader of your stature spends significant time in a remote rural location, people notice," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Particularly when it coincides with substantial equipment deployments and construction activity." Walter stepped forward, extending his hand. "Walter Jenkins. This is my ranch you're standing on, Senator." The senator shook his hand, quickly assessing the relationship between the two men. "Mr. Jenkins, I understand your property is the pilot site for a rather revolutionary agricultural technology program." "That's correct," Walter confirmed, his manner polite but reserved. Years of dealing with government representatives had taught him caution. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more comfortable," the senator suggested, glancing around at the open fields. "What I have to say concerns both of you, and potentially the future of rural technology implementation nationwide." As they walked back toward the ranch house, Daniel and Walter exchanged questioning glances. The senator's unexpected appearance suggested implications beyond their private arrangement, expanding into political and perhaps regulatory territories neither had anticipated. Seated at the kitchen table that had hosted their first shared meal, the senator laid out the purpose of her visit. "I chair the Senate Committee on Rural Development and Agricultural Innovation. We've been following Quantum Nexus's activities with considerable interest. Our work here is entirely private sector," Daniel noted. "A voluntary partnership between my company and Mr. Jenkins." Senator Lawson nodded. "For now, yes. But the applications of this technology could have far-reaching implications for agricultural policy, water rights legislation, even climate resilience planning. The federal government has significant interest in such innovations." Walter's expression tightened slightly. "In my experience, government interest often leads to government interference or government support," the senator countered smoothly. "Mr. Jenkins, the technology being implemented on your ranch could potentially address critical issues facing rural communities nationwide. My committee is prepared to propose a substantial funding package to expand this initiative across multiple states, with your property serving as the flagship demonstration site." The proposal hung in the air between them, an unexpected expansion of what had begun as a personal mission for Daniel and a survival strategy for Walter. Federal involvement would mean increased visibility, additional resources, but also inevitable bureaucratic complexities and political dimensions. "Why the sudden interest, Senator?" Daniel asked directly. "Quantum Nexus has been developing agricultural applications for years without attracting this level of attention." "Because you've never before created such a comprehensive implementation," she replied. "Previous applications were isolated technologies. What you're building here is an integrated system that addresses multiple challenges simultaneously: water conservation, energy independence, climate adaptation, even rural education through your plan center. It's precisely the holistic approach our committee has been advocating." Walter leaned back in his chair, studying the senator with the measured assessment of a man who had seen political promises come and go throughout his lifetime. "And what would this government support require from us?" "There's always a cost beyond the obvious." Senator Lawson smiled, appreciating his directness. "Transparency primarily. Data sharing with appropriate agencies, regular reporting, allowing scheduled visits from officials and potential adopters from other regions. Your privacy would be respected, but your success would need to be documentable and to some extent, replicable." As the discussion continued, the potential benefits and complications of government involvement became clearer. Federal support could accelerate the expansion of the program to other struggling agricultural communities, potentially transforming rural livelihoods across the country. However, it would also introduce political considerations into what had been a purely private endeavor. I'd need to consult with my executive team, Daniel said finally. This represents a significant shift from our original vision for the initiative. And I'd need to think about what it means for my family and this land, Walter added. Government programs have a way of outlasting their usefulness while their restrictions remain firmly in place. Senator Lawson accepted their caution without apparent disappointment. Of course. This isn't a decision to be made hastily. I'll leave you the formal proposal to review. She rose to depart, adding, "What you're creating here matters, gentlemen. It could become a model for rural revitalization nationwide. I hope you'll consider the broader implications of your work." After the senator's departure, Walter and Daniel remained at the kitchen table, the proposal folder between them representing yet another unexpected turn in their evolving partnership. "Didn't see that coming," Walter remarked dryly. Daniel shook his head, his expression thoughtful. "I should have anticipated political interest once the implementation began showing results. Technology with this kind of impact rarely remains purely private for long. Question is," Walter said, "do we want what started as a personal matter between us becoming a government showcase? You were looking to honor your father and help my family preserve this ranch. How does involving Washington serve either purpose?" Daniel considered the question carefully. It could extend the impact, help other families facing situations similar to yours. My father's innovation could benefit far more people through a nationally supported program. "At what cost, though?" Walter pressed. "Government support means government control, in my experience. Regulations, restrictions, paperwork, not to mention turning this ranch into a parade ground for politicians, looking for photo opportunities with real Americans." The tension in Walter's voice revealed his deeper concern that the sanctuary of his family land, the legacy he had worked his entire life to preserve, might be transformed into something unrecognizable under the spotlight of political attention. Daniel recognized the legitimate fear behind the objection. "Nothing happens without your approval, Walter. This is your home, your heritage. If you don't want the federal involvement, we continue exactly as planned, a private partnership between Quantum Nexus and the Jenkins Ranch." The easy deference to Walter's wishes, the respect for his authority over his own land, reaffirmed the foundation of trust that had developed between them. This wasn't a billionaire steamrolling over a struggling farmer's concerns, but a genuine collaboration between equals in the ways that mattered most. "Let me think on it," Walter said finally. "Need to discuss it with Emma, too. This affects her future as much as mine." As evening approached, Emma returned from her day working with the implementation team, her excitement about the progress visible as she joined them on the porch. "The north field sensors are all online," she reported enthusiastically. "The data's already showing patterns we never would have detected manually. Dr. Sato thinks we might be able to reduce water usage even further than projected." Walter listened with quiet pride as his granddaughter detailed the technical advancements, her natural intelligence embracing the new possibilities while remaining grounded in her agricultural heritage. When she finished, he explained Senator Lawson's visit and the proposal for federal expansion of the program. Emma's reaction was measured but optimistic. It could mean more resources for the education center, additional research opportunities. The senator's right about one thing: what's happening here could help a lot of struggling farm families if it were implemented more broadly. "But at what cost to our privacy, our independence?" Walter questioned. "This land has been ours, alone for generations. Do we want it becoming a political showcase?" Emma considered her grandfather's concerns with the respect they deserved. "Maybe the question isn't whether we want government involvement, but how we define the terms of that involvement. If we're going to do this, we set boundaries that protect what matters most to us." Daniel nodded appreciatively at her approach. "That's exactly right. We don't have to accept the senator's proposal as presented. We can negotiate terms that preserve your autonomy while still allowing broader implementation of the technology. As darkness fell, the three continued their discussion on the porch, weighing personal values against potential broader impact. The simple lunch that had initiated their connection had evolved into something with implications far beyond any of them had imagined, not just saving one family ranch or honoring one man's legacy, but potentially transforming agricultural practices across rural America. My father believed technology should serve humanity, not the other way around, Daniel reflected as the stars appeared above them. He created innovations to solve real problems, to make lives better. Maybe the true honor to his memory isn't just acknowledging his past contributions, but extending their impact into the future. Walter gazed out at his land, now hosting a harmonious blend of traditional agricultural wisdom and cutting-edge technology. My grandfather used to say that good stewardship means leaving things better than you found them, not just for your children, but for all who come after you. In that moment of shared reflection, the path forward began to clarify, not a surrender of their original vision, but an expansion of it that remained true to the values that had brought them together. The unlikely friendship between an elderly rancher and a tech billionaire had created something neither could have achieved alone, a bridge between different worlds that might now extend far beyond the boundaries of one family farm. 6 months passed with remarkable swiftness, transforming both the Jenkins ranch and the lives of those connected to it. The water management system had progressed from experimental implementation to fully operational status, its effectiveness exceeding even the most optimistic projections. Fields that had struggled under years of drought now flourished with precisely calibrated irrigation, soil health improving with each cycle of carefully monitored nutrients and water conservation. Walter stood at the edge of the eastern pasture, watching as the morning sun illuminated what had once been the most vulnerable section of his property. Now it supported a thriving crop of drought-resistant wheat, developed through a collaboration between quantum nexus agronomists and Walter's generations of experiential knowledge. Your grandfather wouldn't recognize the place, came Emma's voice as she joined him in his morning survey. Or maybe he would, but in the best way possible. Walter nodded, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. He'd recognize the respect for the land. The technology would surprise him, but not the intention behind it. That's what matters. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a small group touring the property. Dr. Sato leading several agricultural officials from neighboring counties, explaining the integration of traditional farming practices with the new water management technology. Such tours had become regular occurrences since Walter and Daniel had negotiated a modified version of Senator Lawson's proposal, allowing for knowledge sharing while maintaining the ranch's autonomy. The Jenkins-Carson model, Dr. Sato was explaining to the visitors using the term that had become the official designation for their collaborative approach. Combining multi-generational agricultural wisdom with advanced technology creates systems that are not only more efficient, but more adaptable to specific local conditions. Emma smiled at the terminology. Still feels strange hearing our names linked like that, as though we've created some kind of historical partnership. Isn't that exactly what's happened? Walter replied thoughtfully. Two families, separated by circumstances for decades, brought together to create something neither could have managed alone. On the northern boundary of the property, construction of the James Carson Innovation Center was nearing completion. The building itself was a marvel of sustainable architecture, solar panels integrated into the roof design, rainwater collection systems feeding the demonstration gardens, and expansive windows that reduced the need for artificial lighting while showcasing the natural beauty of the surrounding landscape. Daniel Carson visited weekly, his personal involvement in the project extending far beyond typical CEO oversight. Today he was scheduled to arrive with a special visitor, his mother, Claire Carson, who at 78 had finally agreed to see the tribute being created to honor her late husband's legacy. Nervous about meeting her? Emma asked as they walked back. Toward the ranch house, Walter considered the question, curious more than nervous. She knew James Carson in a way none of us did, as the man, not just the inventor or the father. Her perspective completes the picture somehow. The relationship between Walter and Daniel had deepened over the months of collaboration, evolving from mutual respect into genuine friendship. Their weekly meetings about project progress often extended into long conversations about family legacies, the nature of innovation, and the intersection of tradition and progress. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they had discovered a shared philosophy about the things that truly mattered in life. As midday approached, Daniel's vehicle appeared on the horizon, followed by another car, a private medical transport van that indicated Claire Carson's fragile health required special accommodations. Walter and Emma waited on the porch, understanding the significance of this visit for Daniel. When the vehicles arrived, Daniel emerged first, his expression a complex mixture of anticipation and concern. He approached Walter with the easy familiarity that had developed between them. She insisted on coming, he explained quietly, despite her doctor's reservations. Said she needed to see this place, to understand what her husband's legacy has become. Walter nodded understanding. Some journeys are worth the risk. With careful assistance from medical attendants, Claire Carson emerged from the transport vehicle, small and physically frail, but with alert eyes that took in the ranch with evident curiosity. Despite her advanced age and the oxygen tubes discreetly providing supplemental support, there was an undeniable strength in her bearing. Daniel guided his mother to the porch where Walter and Emma waited. "Mom, this is Walter Jenkins and his granddaughter Emma. They're the partners I've been telling you about." Claire extended a thin hand, her grip surprisingly firm as she shook Walter's hand. "Mr. Jenkins, my son says you knew James when you were both young men." Walter nodded, studying her face with respectful interest. "We worked together briefly at the lumber mill. He was always tinkering with something, seeing possibilities others missed." A smile touched Claire's lips, warming her entire countenance. "That sounds like my James, always building the future in his mind while his hands were busy with the present." They settled in the living room, where Walter had thoughtfully arranged for comfortable seating that would accommodate Claire's medical needs. As they talked, the connection between past and present began to fill in, Claire's memories of James Carson adding depth and dimension to the picture they had been assembling. He arrived in Seattle with nothing but a backpack and that brilliant mind, she recalled, her voice growing stronger as she spoke of the past. Found work at a small electronics firm, always taking on the projects no one else wanted because they seemed impossible. "That's where we met. I was the office manager, trying to keep the chaotic little company functioning." Daniel listened with rapt attention. These details of his parents' early life together new even to him. Claire had always been reticent about the painful parts of their history, protecting her son from the full weight of the injustice done to his father. He never stopped creating, never stopped believing he could build something meaningful, Claire continued. The centerpiece of the historical display was the original prototype, now housed in a custom-designed case that preserved it while allowing visitors to understand its function and significance. Beside it stood a modern quantum processor developed by Quantum Nexus, the technological great-grandchild of James Carson's original concept, demonstrating how foundational ideas evolve across generations. As Walter studied the displays, Daniel joined him, having arrived early for final preparations before the next day's ceremonies. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, gesturing to the completed center around them. "Is it what you imagined when we first discussed the idea?" Walter considered the question thoughtfully. "It's more, in most ways. Bigger, certainly. More comprehensive in its approach." He paused, looking through the expansive windows to the ranch beyond. But the heart of it is exactly right, connecting past and future, tradition and innovation. Building bridges instead of walls between different ways of understanding the world. Daniel nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. That's what I was hoping you'd say. All the technology, all the educational programs, they're just tools. What matters is the philosophy behind them, the values they embody. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us,